I'm going to be a Christian again. Do you ever fear what would happen to you if you ever left the religion of Islam?
No, I don't.
Andrew Tate sat down with Patrick McDavid, and as you would expect, the topic of Islam and Christianity came up.
They had respect for the country they were in, if they had respect for the native population and for Christianity, should be doing a pretty good job, or should be trying to make it clear that they are not a threat. Instead, they walk around and try their very best to scare everyone all the time. And then they wonder why Islamophobia exists. And as a Muslim, I will say that because it's obvious. It's obvious. But when I say that, they turn on me and they attack me. But it doesn't matter what they say. It matters what God says.
Tate, just curious. You probably very qualified. Probably one of the few people in the world qualified to do this because it's not a big number. If you look at how many people in the U.S. convert, Rob, can you go say how many people convert from Christian to Muslim in America? It's not a big number. And if you look at how many women left, more women than men, I think the number is such a small, there you go, roughly 30,000 people a year convert to Islam in U.S. The difference is they have a lot of kids and they have big families, so that's their strategy. Majority of that 30,000 are women. But you, as a man, an anomaly, you go from Christian to being a Muslim. So I know what it is to be a Christian. I know what it is to be a Syrian Armenian. I know what it is to be an immigrant. I know what it is to be certain things, and I witness it, right? When you were a Christian, what attacks or goods did you see that you're like, man, I never had that? Because I remember when we spoke when we were in Romania, you said, like, when I was at church, Muslims sent me letters, Christians didn't send me letters. I remember that conversation that happened. Now that you're a Muslim, what is the biggest difference of treatment, and does it kind of make you sit there and say, man, I understand why the Bible teaches tolerance for certain things?
I think this is a good question to ask. Andrew Tate has repeatedly said that when he was in prison or detained, it was the Muslims who sent him letters and not Christians. It's interesting to now hear him criticizing Muslims for the situation in the UK, when for a while there, he was all about championing what they were doing. If I'm not mistaken, he was even defending an attack that happened from someone affiliated with Islam. On the one hand, you can say that at least he is willing to call out both sides, which doesn't happen very often, especially nowadays. But what I think this shows is that he's not truly committed to any ideology. It seems like it's all about what is popular at the moment, what's going to garner more attention, more clicks, and more views. I haven't followed him as much, but based on some of the things he said and done while claiming to be a Christian, those two things seem to be at odds. When it comes to tolerance being taught in the Bible, I'd be curious to know what PBD meant by this statement. The Bible is not tolerant when it talks about the worship of false gods. The scripture is clear when it comes to that. They are commanded to turn from those idols and tear down the high places, the altars, etc. The Bible is clear. Only Yahweh is to be worshipped. Fast forward into the New Testament, and you see the Apostle Paul going into these other nations, bringing the good news of the Lord. And the call is for those people to turn from their false God to the true God. 1 Thessalonians 1 verses 9 through 10. For they themselves report concerning us the kind of reception we had among you, and how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who delivers us from the wrath to come.
What is the difference?
I understand the question, but tolerance is it's a double-edged sword.
I agree.
Right? Because it's tolerance that's allowed Christianity and the church to end up mocked universally across the planet and to not defend their lands. And the Christian thing to do is to sit there and allow your life and your race and your country to be destroyed because it's the Christian thing to do. So tolerance is a double-edged sword. I was an atheist for a long time, and then I became a Christian. I reverted to Christianity instantly because I believed in God, and I was born in a Christian nation. Then I decided to do some research on the different religions, and I found affinity with Islam. Right. But my affinity with Islam is between me and God. Me trying to please every Muslim on the planet is never going to happen because I'm never going to be able to make them happy. And there's always some of them who are unhappy with me. And there is a contingent of Muslims who like what I say, and there's some that don't like what I say. And that's fine. I'm not here to try and appease them. I'm here to be honest to myself and be honest to my religion and honest to my faith, and also be a rational actor and a rational human. And a lot of my views Muslims don't agree with because they throw their rationality away in light of group identity politics.
This is a good take, and I'm inclined to agree with what he says here. I think what has happened is that the church has fallen for the world's definition of tolerance, which isn't really tolerance at all. The way the culture wants to define tolerance is basically, I agree with everything I say, affirm or approve anything I hold to, and if you don't, then you're being hateful. This just isn't what tolerance is. Tolerance by definition would assume some sort of disagreement. There's no need for this if we all agree on everything. This is one of the definitions for tolerance: the ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular, the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with. So the church, in some cases, has bought into this lie that to disagree with someone means you hate them. So they chose inclusion over what the scripture has to say. But that's not Christianity. That's progressive Christianity, and that's not biblical. Progressive Christianity takes issue with the exclusive claims we find in scripture. The problem for them is that this is what Jesus himself taught. It doesn't get more exclusive than John 14:6. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, it sounds like Andrew is trying to advocate for something like the Crusades while completely ignoring the first 900 to 1,000 years of Christianity. Unlike Islam, Christianity did not spread by the sword. Christianity spread in spite of facing such persecution, and it continues to spread even now in the face of persecution. One could argue that it was persecution that pushed Christianity to spread to the ends of the earth. This is, after all, what we see in the book of Acts.
You're evolving. One day gets to a point where you're like, this is not change. It's going to get worse and worse and worse, nastier on you. Do you ever fear, if you ever say, you know what, I'm going to be a Christian again, do you ever fear what would happen to you if you ever left the religion of Islam?
No, I don't. But I'm sure that would be a problem for them. I mean, I'm sure, I can imagine people getting angry if I did that.
You don't fear it if it...
No. If that's how I feel, then that's what I would say.
Kudos to Andrew Tate for standing on his convictions, as shaky as they may seem sometimes. Now, we know that he was a professional kickboxer, so he probably feels like no one is going to be running up on him, and he's probably right. That's probably not a smart move. That being said, I wonder how aware he is of the constant threats former Muslims face. One example that comes to mind right away is that of apostate prophet. There was a real conversation of him sitting out an in-person debate in New Jersey because someone threatened his life. Now, this is just one example. From my understanding, this is something he deals with all the time. Another one that comes to mind is Hatun Tash. It seems like, in a lot of ways, she is target number one. Not that long ago, she was attacked at Speaker's Corner, and the police weren't very eager to help. Another one, he's not a former Muslim, but David Wood also endorsed these threats repeatedly. One has to wonder how much of the Quran he is actually reading if he thinks he's getting off easy if he leaves Islam. The Quran is clear what should happen to people who apostatize. Andrew says a lot of things in this interview. And just to clear the air, I am not an Andrew Tate fan. I don't think him being allowed back into the US was the best move if he is still facing those charges in Romania. He says that if it happened in the UK with the grooming gangs happened in a Muslim country, those men would receive the deletion penalty. We would like to think that this would be, in fact, be the case, but is that actually true? I think this misses something somewhat obvious. It will likely be the case if those girls were Muslim. But if they were foreigners, like what's happening in the UK, then unfortunately, I'm not so sure. The Quran has verses that talk about making war against the infidel, and this applies to everyone that is not a Muslim. Another thing that needs to be talked about is how the Prophet in Islam did marry a 9-year-old, and how this is more or less celebrated. He points out how Christianity has its issues too. And yes, I would agree. There are some Christians that are not good representatives of Christianity. The difference is that those Christians do so in spite of what the Bible teaches. While in Islam, an argument can be made that they are doing what the Quran and the Hadiths actually say. Let's not forget that one of the allegations against Tate also involves someone who was underage. I don't think we should just gloss over that. I do see a bit of a double standard, particularly with conservatives here in the States who are, in one sense, celebrating and cheering on Elon Musk, for some of his transgressions, while they're trying to condemn everything that Andrew Tate has done. And this is not a trying to defend Andrew Tate situation. No, I think the guy is not a good dude based on what we've seen so far. That doesn't mean he can't change. I think by the power of Jesus, anyone can change. My concern here is that a lot of people on the right, conservatives, want to call themselves Christians, And if you are in fact a Christian, then you have to be willing to use just scales. If you want to call out what Andrew Tate is doing, you can't just turn a blind eye and celebrate what Elon Musk is doing. You want to be able to call both things out for what they are. That's not something that's optional for us as Christians, right? We are called to be people of justice, people of righteousness. So let's make sure that we are doing that in all facets, or at least striving to do that in all facets. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.